Welcome to We Question and Learn. As of this broadcast, we're celebrating the beginning of our 21st year here on the air at WQLN MPR, FM 91.3 in Erie, Pennsylvania, Greater Northern Pennsylvania. And today, I feel a very important guest, and I'm really looking forward to talking with Derek Martin, the Executive Director of the Erie Regional Airport. Derek, good to have you on the program today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Hey, could you clarify the title? I see Erie International Airport. I see Erie Regional Airport Authority. For us less familiar folks, could you clarify the titles for us so that we have it exactly correct for you?
So the Erie Regional Airport Authority is the organization that's governing the airport. There's five members that are appointed by the city of Erie, 4 members appointed by the county. That board is the legal entity for the Erie Regional Airport Authority. Erie International Airport is basically what people that fly in and out of a community will think of as they think of it as the Erie Airport. So where you're flying. Chicago has something similar. Orchard Field is the technical name of Chicago O'Hare International Airport, but everybody calls it O'Hare. So it's just a little nuance.
Okay. Well, I wanted to get it correct in this case because I think the topics that we want to talk about today are very, very important. Now, recently, and we just had the directors and the folks at the Jefferson on the air here on this program, but you had a meeting at the Jefferson Educational Society, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that as an opening statement for this interview.
So the Jefferson Society was a gracious host to host the airport. The presentation was given by Brian Slawin, as well as myself and Dan Gianelli, who is the president of the Erie board. And what we're trying to do is provide people with information on what's going on in the airport and some of the misconceptions people might have or think about the airport. One of the biggest ones is the airport takes taxpayer dollars. Well, the airport doesn't take taxpayer dollars. We don't have taxing authority, so we can't take taxpayer dollars. So we get no money from the city, no money from the county, and no money from the state for the operations of the Erie Regional Airport. And so that's a big misconception. People think their tax dollars pay for it. So the airport is funded by capital projects through an aviation user fee, which is part of the Aviation Trust Fund. 7.5% of your tax on an airline ticket goes towards fulfilling that fund. You get dollars based on the number of passengers to get on a plane a year out of your community, and those only can be used for capital projects. You get 90% from the feds, 10% is local, 5% from the state, and 5% from the airport for those projects. So
wow.
The day-to-day operations is funded by the users of the airport. So whether people rent cars, buy food in the restaurants, the airlines pay rent, cargo companies pay rent and landing fees. Those are how the airport is funded.
So, well, no question about it. First of all, we're very fortunate to have an airport of this size and quality in our great city and our county. Going back as long as you've been the executive director, what do you feel are your largest challenges right now?
Well, the challenge is that we don't understand the negative impact the global pandemic had on the aviation industry. I think it was worse than anything else. If you look at that one point during the pandemic, if you drove by a car dealership and there were no cars in the parking lot, I mean, I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams growing up would say, I'm going to go to a car dealer and they have no cars. That would not be part of your thought process. And it was similar with the pandemic is there was a shortage of, after that, the airlines really cut their employees that try to get rid of it. They didn't know if they were ever going to get back to having full flights again. So they offered early retirements. And during the course of that, airlines just accelerated decisions that they made prior to the pandemic. So 2009, when Delta and Northwest Airlines merged, they had 500 of the CRJ 200 series planes. That was the plane that flew into Erie. And they had a plan to get rid of it because that plane was non-economical. And people say, well, how can that be? when you look at an airplane's life, you look at the production life, how long it stayed in production. So the 747-400, which is a long-haul horse of Northwest Airlines at the time, United, going across the Atlantic or the Pacific, was in production for 50 years. The CRJ was in production for less than 15, I believe. And because the plane was not functional. And so when the pandemic hit, they were getting rid of those planes, but there was a lot of pressure on pilot shortage. So low-cost carriers that were started, they were poaching or taking pilots from these regional carriers and basically sometimes doubling or tripling their salary to come fly for a low-cost carrier. And that effect caused that the regional carriers, if they wanted to try to retain those pilots, had to match their service. So you've got a pilot that was flying a 50-passenger plane now making as much as a pilot that's flying a 180 to 200-passenger plane. It really makes the economics very difficult. So Delta decided to get rid of the CRJ-200, and they replaced it with an A220, which is a passenger plane that holds 109 to 139 passengers. And so that's where the challenge is. In a speech Ed Bastian made to the Airport Council International Conference in Minneapolis a couple of years ago, this is what he said. In the former home of Northwest Airlines, that was where their headquarters was. For some markets, we're going to need to make choices as to whether we're going to fly a larger plane, whether we're going to consolidate the number of operations we have, but you're never again going to see the 50-seat aircraft have the level of promise in the industry. In fact, at Delta, we're just about out of them. I think we have less than 20 that we are flying today, and I told you about when they merged, they had 1,200 aircraft, 500 were 50-seaters. So you can see, I mean, this was a deliberate strategy prior to the pandemic to get rid of that aircraft, and it just got accelerated because of the economics of that aircraft and the shortage of pilots.
And that was the pandemic that caused that.
It accelerated it.
Accelerated it, yeah.
Yeah, it accelerated. Yep, that's right.
I remember as many as 4 airlines flying in and out of here. Could you frame what is the current level of activity at the airport?
So you have a long memory.
I do. I remember when you folks or someone brought in that Ford Tri-Motor.
Yeah, we had the Tri-Motor a couple of years ago for an event and gave people trips around the community.
I flew on that airplane in 8th grade, and when I saw it again at my ripe old age of 70, I had, oh my gosh, talk about conserving aircraft power, so to speak.
Yeah.
But with that said, what
so
are we...
you remember the time frame around 2007, 2008. There was abundance again of that 50-passenger regional jet.
Yes.
And there were also more airlines. So you had nonstop service to Cincinnati. You had nonstop service to Detroit. You had nonstop service to Philadelphia. You had nonstop service to Pittsburgh. You had a lot of different destinations you flew. One, because of the aircraft type, and 2, because of the number of airlines in the industry. So if you look at today, some of the service that you had, that airline doesn't exist. So you had U.S. Airways that had nonstop service to Pittsburgh. Well, there was a hub there. So people could fly from Erie to Pittsburgh and connect basically anywhere they wanted to go. Delta ran a hub in Cincinnati, so you had nonstop service to Cincinnati. That hub doesn't exist. Cincinnati merged with Delta Airlines, so there's no longer a hub there. Northwest had the service and went to Delta. Delta is the hub in Detroit, but Delta got rid of the airplanes, so there's not the service there. Philadelphia is a hub for U.S. Airways at the time, but they merged with American. There's still a hub there, but we're going to their largest hub, which is in Charlotte, for our service. There's about 138 or 158 nonstop U.S. destinations from Charlotte and about 36 international. So we now have 3 departures a day to Charlotte, to that hub, to connect people around the world. So the students that go to Gannon University, Mercerhurst, Penn West, Edinburgh, a lot of those international students fly into Erie through that Charlotte hub.
That is incredibly interesting. How do you measure? Well, obviously you count heads, you count aircraft, How do you measure need as you move forward, taking care of the airport?
Well, the need also has to do with what our demand is. So people want to go to different destinations, but there's a lot of things that play into that. So it'd be nice to have a need to go back to a Western destination, whether that's a Detroit, whether it's Chicago, whether it's something beyond. Some people talk about Dallas, but there's limitations that a lot of consumers don't understand. There's a thing called a scope clause. A scope clause is a component that unions have put in place to limit the range of an airplane that can fly between point A and point B based on nautical miles. So I'll give you an example. No wonder people in Roanoke, Virginia, wanted to have nonstop service between Boston and their community. Boston is 502 nautical miles from Boston. So the two carriers that you could possibly fly on that route are Delta, and the other one was JetBlue because they have some components there. Well, JetBlue, their smallest plane they had at the time was over 100 passengers. There was enough demand to go between those cities on a 100-passenger plane. Delta Airlines had a scope clause with their pilots, which says they could not fly a regional jet more than 500 nautical miles.
Wow.
Roanoke, Boston's 502. So that eliminates that opportunity for Delta because of that scope clause. So as we look at other markets from Erie, are the airlines that we're trying to talk to that would make sense? Do they have a scope clause that would limit that? So, for example, we're talking Erie to Dallas. Dallas is clearly over 500 nautical miles. If there's a scope clause, there's no way that we would get a regional jet to fly that route. And so there's a lot of things that are in play that the local community has no effect on. And we have challenges by being surrounded by 4 airports: Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Buffalo, and Toronto. And the other challenge we have is the number of people that have access to low-cost carriers for some of those destinations. That's why we're trying to get a low-cost carrier to keep that traffic home and to keep more people coming to Erie. This week, actually, or in June, we hosted a global entry event where people can meet with Customs and Border Protection and be approved for 5 years access in and out of the country for expeditions. We had people from Rochester, New York this year. We've had people from other side of Pittsburgh, Canton, Akron, Cleveland. Last year we had people fly up from Dallas as well as Boston, Massachusetts to take advantage of the service. We had over 355 people go through over 3 days. And so it was well received by the locals as well as people in the regional community. So we believe if we get a low-cost carrier, we could track people that are, in Ashtabula, Meadville, and a little bit further south, over to Jamestown. And so all those people would, if they're looking for a nonstop flight on a low-cost carrier, say to Orlando, they would choose Erie over one of those other destinations.
That's fabulous. What about private aircraft? What's that like today at the Erie International Airport?
Well, we have a lot of private aircraft. Erie Insurance uses that. Every spring they go out on their dog and pony show. They visit their different offices on the 12 states that they're in, including the District of Columbia, and they go meet people. So this week, I think they flew out to Canton, Akron. They flew to Virginia, and so they continue that over a three-day period and make it happen. So, or not a 3-week period, but it's more like a 3 to 4 month period. They're flying out, meeting with different places. The senior management team of Erie flies out and does that. We have general aviation aircraft that fly in and out. We have a Customs and Border Protection where people from Canada fly in and connect through Erie to clear customs and then continue on maybe to Florida. We have an international company in Sagertown that has flown nonstop from Helsinki, Finland to Erie to clear customs to get to their homes, which is about 10 minutes away from the Erie airport. So there's a lot of smaller traffic that goes in and out of the airport, along with cargo carriers that bring cargo in every year for FedEx every day. Monday through Friday for people that are expecting packages.
Major airlines, how do they affect you? For example, Boeing. What's happening in that arena? Is there something we can do? I'm guessing this is more of a market-driven need, so to speak, as to do they want to come to Erie? How does this work?
Well, so Boeing is a manufacturer of aircraft, and Boeing, I'd say when Boeing sneezes, everybody else catches a cold. And what I mean by that, they've had some challenges with production. They've had some challenges with safety. They're on the microscope of the FAA. So the challenge is that everybody's waiting for an aircraft of some sort. So Boeing's trying to deliver, for example, to United Airlines this year. They were scheduled to take delivery of 185 aircraft. Because of production and the issues I just mentioned, they're going to take delivery of 61 aircraft. So their schedule of cities they wanted to serve or change the flight patterns or whatever they wanted to do has changed. But that airplane that they were going to get from Boeing was going to be given to, say, United, but the plane United was going to fly was going to be sold to, say, a low-cost carrier. That carrier can't do their growth plans because they're not getting a plane. So there's a sort of domino effect of, again, things that people in Erie do not control, that control the fate of the airline industry. And that's where the challenge is that there's so many things that are at play, whether it's the pilots, the scope clauses, Boeing issues. Those things create havoc for growth in the industry, both for large and small airports.
So you have a fund of some sort, the Fly Erie Fund. Is that how you're taking a proactive stance or taking a proactive position in helping Erie, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so the Fly Erie Fund is not an airport fund. It's a local fund headed by the Chamber and Growth Partners, and they're working with both public and private sector to basically come up with a program to get us in the game. And I'll explain what I mean by get us in the game. So if you look at all these airports that people say, well, they're getting air service, they're getting air service. Well, somebody's writing a check. And I'll give West Virginia. The governor was here a few weeks ago. Says he's tired of losing to other states. And he mentioned Ohio. Ohio has a program called Jobs Ohio, where if a local community from economic development is trying to bring an airline to town, for every, say, dollar that you invest locally, the state will give you $4. So if you come up with 200,000, the state will give you 800,000. Now they have $1 million incentives to give to an airline that the airport can't legally do. So in West Virginia, the governor down there came up with a package: $2 million of state funds, 350,000 from the county, and 150,000 from the state for a 2.5 million package to incentivize Breeze to start service out of that community down to carriers or airports in the southeast. So as you can see, these other communities and states have these programs, and we have nothing in Pennsylvania. So we worked with the local Chamber and Growth Partners, and they're working with the private and public sector to come up with a fund that we can offer similar types of incentives to bring air carriers to the region.
That's a great method of economic development. Is this a large number that you are aiming for? What would be the goal?
Well, the goal is the airport's putting up $5 billion of our funds to make the rates and charges competitive for the airlines, and the fund, I believe, is $1.5 million. So it's a total package of $6.5 billion to have incentives for air carriers to come. Even as we grow the incentives, we have to still go back to the challenges. Are there planes? Are there pilots?
Yeah.
So, we're trying to do what we can, but we're sort of, in a holding pattern as we wait to see how these things are going to shake out with, the airlines, with Boeing, scope clauses, and delivery of aircraft.
Recently, you had a town hall meeting. How did that go?
Well, it went well. So we try to have town hall meetings to provide information to the local community. This town hall meeting focused on our annual financial statement. Every year, the airport is required by federal government to be audited, and those audited financial statements have to be sent to the federal government. So we go over our accomplishments, things that weren't so happy for us. I mean, in that document talks about, United Airlines leaving in June of 2023. Again, they left because we were the second lowest revenue producer of any 50-seat market that served O'Hare. And so that information's in there. So it's not that the airport doesn't want these airlines here. There are sometimes economic issues that take place. If you think about the global pandemic, how many businesses did the community lose during the course of the global pandemic that have not reopened? And so when you have challenges of revenue and shortages of pilots and aircraft equipment, it's sort of a domino effect. And so we're not immune to what's happening out in the industry as a whole or the community as a whole.
Talk a little bit about your board. How does that work? Are they appointed? Are they elected? How is it set up organizationally?
So we have an appointed board. 5 members are appointed by the city, 4 are appointed by the county. They serve a 5-year term. They can be reappointed for a second 5-year term, and then they term off. So those people are each city and county have different processes for people that have some level of interest in serving on the board, and then those different bodies take the opportunity to appoint individuals that they think would be beneficial to the airport board.
Okay, so local government has a pretty good say on what happens at the airport then.
Yeah, they have a local say of the people that make the decisions, but a lot of the things that we do here at the airport are federally regulated. So, for example, if you remember during the global pandemic, the airport didn't close. The governors of a lot of states were trying to close this, that, and the other thing. They have no jurisdiction over this facility. So, we would get calls, why is the airport open? Because the federal government says we can't close. So we don't close and we just keep operating. We didn't have a lot of people on planes, but the airport was available operating and, creating economic development for communities. I mean, if you think about an industry that flourished during the pandemic would be the Amazon.com. Because the stores were closed, or you're buying whatever you wanted over the internet, and it was shipped to your door. So those things were shipped on planes around the country or trucked, and then it was delivered to the different residents that purchased those products and services.
Okay, this question is from a neophyte. Freight, mail, all that comes through the airport to some degree. Educate me. How does that work?
So UPS runs, they call them a caravan. There are box planes, and they typically have the next day air type of things. If you order the package that needed to be delivered by 10:30 in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes we get 3 or 4 flights a day that come in with that sort of stuff, and then it gets dispersed in the community. Typically, mail does not come into Erie via plane. It goes via truck. So sometimes if you mail a letter here in Erie and you send it to a friend, it winds up in going to Pittsburgh and then coming back to Erie, which sort of makes no sense. You would think the stuff that's staying in Erie.
I'm with you on that, but there's some logic. I think they're trying to copy a large carrier, trying to emulate what they do, a commercial carrier.
Yep.
And you do have commercial folks flying aircraft into Erie?
Yeah, so American Airlines, 3 departures a day to Charlotte. Those are commercial. They come in and out. So it's a 6 o'clock departure, about 1:40, and then 4:40 in the afternoon are the departures. And then there's arrivals at 1:15, 4 o'clock, and then at 10:30 at night. So getting people in and out of the community.
What amazes me is maintenance, and I'm thinking about any winter day when the snow is blowing. That is all your jurisdiction, right? How does that all work?
Well, we have really stringent requirements for snow removal. An airport the size of Erie has to remove the contaminants, is what we call them, from the runways and taxiways within an hour. So it's an ongoing battle. We face challenges with wind and wind blowing. One of the nice things about Erie is when it snows and you sort of cleared off our runways and taxiways, it melts very quickly thereafter. So it's only certain storms where it snows and it lingers in Erie. I mean, if you think about if you average 100 inches of snow in Erie a year, you never see these big, huge piles of snow because it all melts. It snows, melts, snows, melts. It's not like the upper peninsula of Michigan or northern Minnesota, because once it gets cold there and it snows, it's there until May.
It stays, yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's an interesting fact. I would have thought that the snow is blowing and it's blowing over the runways and your challenge is continuous.
Yeah. So it makes it challenging to do that. So it's not like we can, some municipalities, it's a Sunday, they don't want to go out and, move the snow because they don't want to pay overtime. We don't have that luxury.
Yeah. As you look forward, as you sit at your desk, what's coming up for the airport? Any big ideas coming up? Anything at all? What's the plan, so to speak, for the next few years?
Well, the plan is to solidify what we have with American Airlines, which we've done. We've basically been able to cut their fees for operating at the airport and make it competitive. They are going to replace the 50-passenger regional jets, which we've been talking about earlier. They've got firm deliveries for Embraer 175, which is a 70-seat passenger jet. We're hopeful that they will replace all 3 departures with 3 76-passenger jets. It might not seem like a lot, but if you replace 2 regional jets, that's another, basically a 4th aircraft on a 50-seater. So we would basically be at 4.5, almost 5 frequencies a day based on the number of seats going out of the marketplace. So that's more people staying in hotels. There's more people renting cars. There's more people eating out at restaurants that come to town. So it's a lot more commerce and makes it easier for the college students that are trying to get in and out of the community multiple times a year. I think last year, Gannon University had 1,200 international students, and they all fly in and out of Erie Airport.
I never thought of that. That's a huge market. It's convenient. It makes a lot of sense. I didn't realize that was such a large market for you.
Yeah, the college kids, I mean, if you take all of them combined, you most likely have 2,000, 2,500 international students in the region on an annual basis. I remember I was out when the pandemic started. I did a tour of Penn State Barron, and there's a lineup of these luxury cars, Lincolns, Mercedes, Jag. I said to Chancellor Ford, I said, what are those? Oh, those are our international students. They don't believe driving American cars. I
was going to say, next time you see a nice car, it's not an executive, it's a student. we're teasing around, but actually that's very good because that's an indication of the type of person that's coming to Erie, going to school, studying, and even maybe working here, one place or another. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Emergency services, fire, and that. How does that get managed at the airport?
We have our own police department and our own fire crews, and so that we hire, we train. Right now, we're interviewing for a new police officer, so it's always ongoing.
Excellent. Derek Martin, Executive Director, CEO at the Erie Regional Airport. Thank you so much. That was really informative. You seem to be right on top of any aspect that may come across your desk. Thank you, Derek Martin, Executive Director at the Erie Regional Airport, and we appreciate your visit today.
This is Andy Roth. On Sunday, July 14th, the American Tapestry Project explores freedom's holidays through the music that sings of America. From immigrant-inspired Stars and Stripes Forever and God Bless America to George M. Cohen's It's a Grand Old Flag to the badass from Massachusetts, Boston.com wrote, America the Beautiful, we'll look into the people behind the music. My country, 'tis of thee I sing, on the American Tapestry Project, Sunday, July 14th at 4 p.m.
Welcome to We Question and Learn. This is your host, Tom Pies. I have Robert Lawrence Kuhn on the phone, and greetings. Thank you for being here.
Tom, it's a pleasure. We're great partners with WQLN, and appreciate you broadcasting our show, and looking forward to our conversation.
I think when people watch the program, and I know they appreciate it because I hear this from our members and constituents, you're the executive producer, you're the writer, you're the host. You probably did most of the arrangements to get on PBS over the years. Can you give me an insight how this came to be? What provoked you to do a program? And two, how did you get on PBS?
Well, it is a long story, but as friends and colleagues over the years, we'll go through it. I guess I start with saying I've always had a passion for the big ideas of human consciousness. That was my primary interest as a young person in college, and I did my PhD in neuroscience as part of that thinking. But then, due to the exigencies of life and who knows what else, having to pay for the kids' schooling, I didn't continue as a scientist, which was the original plan, or a medical doctor, but went into business and did various other things that, it's always better to be lucky than smart, as I said, and I was pretty lucky in investment banking. But I always followed the field of neuroscience and always wanted to go back to dealing with the big questions of life. Let's see, how many years would it have been? It would have been almost 30 years later after getting my doctorate. I was able to have this vision to do a program that would deal with the biggest questions that relate to both science and philosophy. The original idea was focused on the mind. It was called, before it was on the air, it was called Mind Quest, and the subtitle was The Closest You'll Get to Truth About These Scientific and Philosophical Topics. And I talked to some people at PBS, and some were interested and some were not. And it turned out there was one small station in Southern California that wanted to take a chance. And, I was maybe known as an author in various categories, but I had never done television. So I was, an unknown. So this station, it was KOCE at the time, it's now PBS SoCal in Southern California, took a chance and ran a season. But the manager, his name was Mel Rogers, the president of the station, didn't like the title. He didn't like Mind Quest. And he said, well, what is this show about? And I gave him the subtitle. I said, this is the closest you'll get to truth. This is sort of the way of thinking. Not that it is the truth, but it's the closest you'll get, and it may be a process. And he said, well, that's the title, Closer to the Truth. And I said, no, it can't be the, because it's not the. I'm not that crazily arrogant. It's a process. So let's take out the closer to truth. And, I mean, it was like a 30-second conversation, and it was done. And that title has been with us for 25 years almost. And it has really been great. The way we have, for years, we had 3 categories of topics, and we called them Cosmos, which deals with the universe, physics, mathematics, the high focus on cosmology, the nature of the universe and new discoveries and what they mean, not as a science report of the latest discoveries, but rather the implications, what it would mean for human understanding. Second category we call consciousness, which deals with brain, mind, personal identity, artificial intelligence, alien intelligences, even some ESP here and there, all the things that have to do with mental activity. And the third category is called meaning, and it is the core based on philosophy of religion. It's not sectarian religion, but it's dealing with questions about existence of God, if there is a God, what's the nature of God, the relationship between science and religion, all of the questions in a non-sectarian way. And we feature, theists and atheists almost in equal proportion, and really try to get the best thinking out of everyone. What I'm really pleased about is that starting about 2 years ago, we began a focus in that category for non-Western religions. We had a very high skew towards Western religions, Judeo-Christian philosophers, mainly Christian philosophers, because they were a lot of very good philosophy is done in the Christian tradition, always has been. But with the internationalization, we really wanted to bring in more. We had some Islamic philosophers, and many scientists were Hindus, and so they represented that. But it wasn't a real thorough approach, and we've done that now. And in fact, literally right now, the first broadcasts are being broadcast of Eastern traditions and big questions, and it's a focus on Hinduism, Buddhism, and Chinese religion. And coming up soon will be global philosophy of religion. It's not on the air yet, but it's in process, working on the scripts right now, and that will focus a lot on Islam. So we're really pleased to enlarge the same thinking, though, not about the religions themselves. Other people can do that, but on the philosophical implications. So, that's the overview. Closer to Truth is the name. We have no claims to be the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Some people complain about that, by the way. They
Really?
say, we're frustrated. We want to know the truth. And I'm saying, well, I'm sorry. I don't have the truth.
I had you down for 280 programs, and I think you're going to correct me. It's more like over 300?
Yeah, actually, you're not wrong, because since 2008, in the new format, we have had 280 up until December. I think we had a new series on. We're adding a new category, by the way, and it started in December, called Life. So now, instead of being cosmos, consciousness, meaning, it's the three big categories. Now 4. Cosmos, life, consciousness, meaning. So 4, and the first life series was on philosophy of biology, which is very exciting. Very pleased to develop that. And so we're probably literally now 285. We have the new series on Eastern religions, which makes it 290.
Mm-hmm.
But what those don't count was the original series that were roundtables, different format, from 2000 and 2003, and collectively we did 43. So we were at 280. We're right now at 290, but then we add the original ones of 43. So that gets us right now to roughly 333 or something like that. So you're not wrong, because the current format has had 280 until very recently, when we've added the two new series on philosophy of biology, which was started in December, and Eastern religions and global philosophy of religion, which will be more and more of those shows will be broadcast in the next year and a half.
So people can appreciate your efforts. You are on 200 PBS stations?
Yep. It's roughly 200. They rotate. Sometimes stations are in pledge, so they're off the air for a month or so, and then they come back. And it is, it's great. So it's always averaged about 200, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little less. I always say the times we're on are not necessarily prime time, because we don't have cat videos, but we're pleased that we have the shelf space, the airtime on PBS stations like WQON, which is a great partner of ours. And so, we're very happy to be on the air. If it's 6:30 in the morning or 1:30 at night, or 1:30 in the morning, we're just as pleased to be on the air with our topic, to bring it to people who are really interested. And again, we appreciate everyone who has given us the support of their interest over the years.
Now, with all this under your belt, you have published over 30 books. The titles go on and on here. When do you have time to write?
Well, I'm literally writing all the time.
Okay.
Because it's what I love to do. I love it. Sometimes it's under pressure, of course. And some of the books are edited books of other people's works. The two Closer to Truth books that I've done in the past were based on the earlier seasons, and they were basically transcripts of the shows. But when I say that sounds very easy, but I found out that it was even harder than writing your own book, because you have to edit it very carefully, because if you hear an expert talk, it makes eminent sense. But when you see an exact transcript of the same material, it makes no sense because the grammar is not perfect, the order is different, you don't see the inflection. And so you have to do a very careful edit to maintain the style and content, of course, of the original, but make it understandable. So that's been part of the process. I've written on other subjects in my they're not just science and philosophy topics. They are on other aspects that I have done in over the years, in the early years, on business and finance and things like that. And China's been an area of my other world, but Closer to Truth and everything there is my love. And I'll tell you one inside secret, which I know nobody really knows yet. But for the last 8-10 months, I've had a very intense focus on consciousness, and I've written what is equivalent to a book, but it's going to be published in a scientific magazine, a very technical science magazine, but it'll be available for the public as well, and it's called The Landscape of Consciousness, and it gives all the different ideas and explanations that have been given about what is consciousness from a neurobiological point of view, from a philosophical point of view, from a religious point of view, all in one place. So it's really been my major effort, and I'm going to be continuing writing on that nature. And it articulates nicely with the writing the scripts for the shows. So it's really been a wonderful opportunity to deal with these topics that have really been my kind of obsession throughout life. It's not as glamorous as it might seem. It's literally thousands of hours, at night, worrying about words and being sure that they are properly as good as you can. Never perfect, of course. But to properly my first more than a goal, responsibility is to be sure to represent the roughly 500 interviewees who I've done over the years, and to properly represent their ideas in the best possible way. And many of them are contradictory, and it doesn't mean I agree with them, but I have a responsibility to make sure that their views are presented as accurately and honestly as possible.
I'd like to touch on the Kuhn Foundation. I don't think people have heard much about it. No offense to you. I don't think you promote it on the program, but it seems to be an important part of your life. Would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. It's a very simple story. When I sold my business, which was a merger and acquisition business, in the year 2001, it wasn't by today's standards, it wasn't the huge amounts of money that you had. But I spent with a partner 12 years building that, and very hard times. And eventually it was successful. We were able to sell it. And I took a portion of the proceeds, maybe, 20-25% of it, and put it into what would be considered a very small foundation, which we call the Kuhn Foundation, because I had the image that I could I wanted to do something in the area of brain, mind, and cosmology. I didn't have the Closer to Truth vision when we created it, specifically, but I had the general feeling that I wanted to do something. So, as opposed to kind of what the usual when an entrepreneur sells a business, you buy a expensive sports car or a boat or jewelry or whatever to celebrate. I didn't do any of that. Don't have any of those things, but put what would be considered a very small foundation into this foundation, and the object of it would be to promote some of the ideas that we're talking about. And literally a year or two later, the opportunity for Closer to Truth began, and so the Kuhn Foundation the vast majority of its activities over the 25 years has been to support Closer to Truth. We have had other supporters as well, but the large majority of the funding has come from the Kuhn Foundation, and I, of course, have never, in 25 years, and I don't know how many tens of thousands of hours devoted, I never taken any salary or compensation whatsoever, but have helped support it for what is my life passion.
Before we go too far, you are a renowned China expert, and I had to go to Wikipedia to learn that, although that's a very important and prominent part of your life and your credentials. How did that all start? You were into China, so to speak, before I think the world really figured it out? Am I close?
And I take no credit for that. It was what I call the capriciousness of the world. I am very passionate about the work I've done in China, but it is very different than Closer to Truth. Those are my two worlds, Closer to Truth world and China. And they're very different in the sense that Closer to Truth is, as I've said, a life passion. It began when I was literally a teenager, mid-teenager, and has not diminished over the years. China, I had no interest in. There was no whatsoever. I didn't study Chinese. I didn't study Oriental anything. I mean, I was involved in investment banking in the U.S. and no China. But in 1988, 1989, one of my U.S. mentors that I had worked with in sort of science, public policy, which I was working on at the time, had a close friend who was at that time the science minister of China, and they were looking for investment bankers who were literate in science to help China with its early reforms. Remember, this is the late 1980s, and reform had started in the late 1970s. And by the late 1980s, there had been a lot of reform, but none in the science industries. As I put it at the time, a science industry was like a university, a research institute, a manufacturing company, a kindergarten, and a cemetery, all in the same organization. And they wanted to reform. And so I was invited with a couple of others, investment bankers who were literate in science. And that's just led to a whole series of relationships and ways of thinking and opportunities to write. And one of the books I wrote, which was a major project particularly during the time when I was not doing Closer to Truth, after the first few episodes, where I wrote the biography of the former president of China, Jiang Zemin. And that sort of was a key factor in my getting well known in China and other opportunities. And so I take that very seriously. I try to do the best I can. It's difficult in today's world to be able to tell an unbiased story about China because it's such a difficult and sensitive subject. But I have tried to, both through the video and writings, tell my views, which are not the views of the Chinese, and it's not the views of those American politicians who are anti-China. Everybody has issues. I try to deal with topics in things that I know personally, and in what I believe is an objective fashion. But it is difficult in today's world to be objective about topics that are emotional. China being one, there are obviously other issues as well. But as I said, it's what I'd call a grafted on passion that was almost not by choice, but just by circumstance. Whereas Closer to Truth and its content is very an intrinsic, lifelong passion.
Looks like you have a book for that topic, though. You won several awards. How much time did you spend there?
Well, in some years I was there, just a few years, almost 50% of the time. Most years from, I don't know if I had a guess, from, 2000 to 2018, right before the pandemic, I was probably there on average 25 or 30% of the time. I never lived there, but I made many, many trips. And in the process, table tennis became my primary avocation. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
still remains. I still play 2 or 3 times a week,
Oh,
even if I'm working hard, and I have lots of coaches from all different nationalities, and they work me hard. I said, pretend I'm 19, and I'm trying to train for the local, the state team, and work me hard. So that's how I stay in shape.
since your basic degree is in human biology, I'm going to throw you off a half a second here. Have you done anything or have you discussed AI with any of your many, many important guests?
Yeah, AI is an important topic. What we don't do is try to be the technology reporting of what's going on right now. What are the new discoveries? Because there are, you know, a dozen really eminent scientific publications that cover that really well, and they all have daily reports and all of that. So that's not what Closer to Truth is. But what Closer to Truth is dealing with the philosophical and even theological, if it makes sense, implications. And with AI, what is a an important issue in the world, but which we believe is not being understood properly, is the nature of AI consciousness. It is pretty much an assumption of what I call the techno-optimists in Silicon Valley and
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
equivalents around the world, that at some point AI will be conscious, and that brings up a whole series of moral and other even scary human existence kind of questions. Um, and what we say is that the assumption being made is that once you have greater complexity in a certain kind of structure, not just pure complexity of adding more and more CPUs of even a specialized kind, but at some point the belief is that it's inevitable that AI will become conscious, and what does that mean, and how do we control it, or what are the rights and obligations, and a whole series of issues. And those are legitimate issues, but we ask what we believe is an earlier question: is that the case? Is consciousness of the nature that a physical system alone, given all the complexities and structures that would need to be, given all that, but is that sufficient by itself? And we don't I don't give, and a definitive answer to that. But what we do is to show that the question itself is much more challenging and much more and has much more substance and depth than people give it credit for. And so that's the closer to truth question, and we have dealt with that, and we will dealt with that. We will deal with that more. The paper, which I call a paper, which is the size of a book,
Mm-hmm.
that will be published very soon,
Mm-hmm.
deals with that question very strongly. So it is a high concern, and my sense is that most people are not thinking about it in the right way.
Cosmos, life, consciousness. You've done a lot of topics. What's your favorite? Is there any one topic or any one program that you would like to put forefront as part of your biography?
The way I like to answer that question is I have 3 children. The children, they're in their 50s, and if you ask me which one I like better, what would I say?
Yeah.
And
Good,
so,
good answer.
the answer is that every program I work on, every single one, all now 330, whatever, and more to come, I treat as if it's the most important thing in the world when I'm working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe it. And I put my whole life and soul into each program and to work through it. I work with my partner on Closer to Truth, who is the co-creator, director, producer, and director, Peter Getzels.
Mm-hmm.
And when I write the script, and he takes it and works it into a visual creation. It's the original script is longer than the program, so he and his team as editors crafted and making it shorter. And we go back and forth on the script. So it's very much a very creative and dynamic process that Peter and I work on together when crafting the shows from the raw interviews that we have. As you may know, Closer to Truth has really two primary formats. One format are the television shows, which are the so-called crown jewel. That's what we work on. Peter and I work on very intensely together. And each one is a high focus. I mean, it'll take a year for each show from the time we shoot the interview to getting the transcripts, to doing the first draft, to doing multiple drafts, to doing the edit, to adding the music and the what we call interstitials, my commentaries. Then we do voiceovers, and then there's quality production. Huge amount of effort. And each one is treated as if it's like the only thing we're doing. And once it's done and out of mind and on to the next. And it's been a wonderful process. So that's the first thing. The second thing we have, which is a very important resource, are the raw interviews. That's when we'll interview some expert or leading scientist or Nobel Prize winner. And the session usually runs 3 or 4 hours. And we break it into anywhere from, 8 to 15 questions. Normally it's about 10 or 12. Each one is about 8 to 10 minutes. And we have those, and those are on our website, closertotruth.com.
Nice.
And our YouTube channel. And those are raw. And, if I make a mistake or slur a word, we let it go. If there's a technical problem or the interviewee says, look, I made a mistake, we'll edit that out. But that's the raw material. We have about 5,000 of those over the 25 years. And so those are the two products that we have. The raw interviews, I prepare very strongly and very long for each one. I mean, when I go into an interview, for a half day or 3-4 hours with somebody, I've read their books, I've thought about it, and I take that very, very seriously, the preparation. Now we're doing a lot of those online as well. But then when we do the television shows, of that, say, 10-minute interview, we'll pick the best 3 minutes. And then in the 27 minutes or so that we have for our half-hour show that at WQLN we're very pleased to broadcast, we'll have anywhere from 4 to 6 interviews, and we weave that into a story. And that's a very careful selection of that raw 10-minute interview into the kind of the core aspects for the 3 minutes or so for each person.
First of all, I'd like to invite everyone to go to closertotruth.com. Don't miss that. That's an outstanding resource for folks that are great fans of yours, new or over the years. And secondly, thank you for taking time. I know your schedule is incredibly busy.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much, and we wouldn't be where we are without loyal stations like WQLN and your support, Tom, is really an inspiration to us because, as I said, it's quite lonely work.
Yes.
Thousands of hours in the wee hours of the night worrying about every word to try to make it right, and to know that it's appreciated is a great, frankly, inspiration for us.
We truly appreciate your visit today.